Welcome to the lesson on graphing piecewise defined functions. When we plug in a piecewise function into the graphing calculator, we're going to use three different y equals. So because we have three parts to our piecewise function, we're going to take the first part, the x squared plus 2, and that's going to be y1. The x minus 1 is going to be y2. And the square root of 9 minus x squared is going to be y3. The second part when we're graphing a piecewise function is we have to plug in the restrictions on the domain. So when we plug that in, we type in the function, then we type in divided by, and you have to use parentheses to type in the domain restriction. Close the parentheses at the end. So each time where I have a comma, you're going to press in divided by, and then parentheses. When we get to the second function, I'm going to show you how to plug in a function that has two different endpoints to it. So let's start. Type in the y equals button, which is the upper left hand corner. We're going to type in the x squared plus 1. So x, the x button is directly to the right of the alpha or the green button. We're going to square it, so you can either type in the exponent button or the shortcut, which is x squared. And then plus 1, so plus 1. Now we need to tell the calculator, let's restrict our domain. So we press divided by and then parentheses. Now our domain restriction is x is less than 0. So we type in x, which is right next to the alpha button. The less than button is on the math button, but it's the second button, the test. So we have to notice it's in blue. So we have to press the second function, which is blue. So second and math, and we get to the test button. Notice that you have all these choices: equals, not equals, greater than or equal to, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do the less than, which is number 5. The way to get to that is to scroll down till we get to number 5, and then we're just going to press enter once it's highlighted, and that chooses it, and then we type in the number, which is 0. You have to remember to close your parentheses because you have to tell the calculator we're finished with our domain restriction, so be sure that you close that parentheses. And now we're going to go to our y2. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and graph this particular function just so that you can see what we have. So that x squared is a parabola, but we have a domain restriction where it's only going to be less than 0. So notice that we have half of a parabola. The vertex is on the y-axis, and it's only that part of it, so it's in blue. When I go back to the y equals button, so the y1 is in blue. You can see the color coding. y2 is going to be in red. So let's scroll down to y2, and we're going to type in our second part of our function, which is x minus 1, and it has a different domain restriction, so we're still going to put in x. And then subtract. Make sure you use the subtraction button and not the negative key. The calculator will be confused and tell you have an error. Make sure you do not use the negative key. You have to use subtract 1. Now you put in the domain restriction is divided by and parentheses. Now our domain for x minus 1 is x is greater than or equal to 0 and x is less than 2. You can type that in two different ways. The way that it's listed right now, let's just use the x is less than or equal to, 0 is less than or equal to x. Let's type that in first. 0 is less than or equal to, so we got to go to second and then the math button, which is our test function. So second, math, and we're going to go to less than or equal to, which is that number 6. So you can either scroll down and enter, or you can just type number 6. And now I'm going to type in x. The calculator, at this point, you cannot type in that other less than button. It will be confused. It'll tell you have an error. You have to tell the calculator, I want to do this part of the domain and the second part. So we actually have to type in and, but we're not going to type in the word AND. We're going to find it on the calculator. It's located under the second or the blue key and math. So that test function, but now we need to scroll to the right to logic. So scroll to the right, and now you have your choices, and or not. Anyway, we want to choose and. So that's number 1. It's already highlighted. Press enter. And now we need to type in the second part, which is this x is less than 2. So we're just going to type in x is less than, so that's the second math button once again. We're going to go down to less than, which is number 5, so type 5, and then it's less than 2, so type a 2, and we need to be sure that we close our parentheses. We're finished with that domain restriction. So I'm going to go ahead to graph. Remember, this is going to be in red. So notice that our portion now, or the y2 function, is in red. It's just a little bitty sliver because we only had the domain from 0 to 2. Now we have our third part of our piecewise function. So go back to y equals. And this time we're going to scroll down, use the down arrow key to y3, and we're going to type in the square root 9 minus x squared. So the square root button is the second function of the x squared button, so press the blue button and then the x squared button, and now we type in 9 minus x squared, so 9 subtract x, and now we need to square that. You can either use the exponent button or the x squared, but you have to make sure that you scroll to the right to get out from underneath the radical. At this point we're ready for our domain restriction, so we press divided by, then we type parentheses. We have to put a parentheses around the x is greater than or equal to 2. So we're going to type in x. The greater than or equal to is the second math button. And then we find the greater than or equal to. That happens to be the number 4. So again, you can scroll down or you can type number 4. If you scroll down, make sure that you press enter. And then 2. Close your parentheses. And now we're going to graph that. And that's our third part of our piecewise function, which is a little quarter of a circle. That concludes our lesson on graphing piecewise defined functions.